Welcome to Have You Heard, where we talk about issues at the intersection of agriculture and engineering. Let's get started. Here are your hosts, Morgan Hayes and Josh Jackson.
This is the Have You Heard podcast. This is episode number 16. Today we're going to start our show with what's happening on our farms this week. Then we're going to discuss weaning and specifically Josh's approach, which is fenceline weeding. I'm Morgan Hayes, an assistant professor in the Biosystems and Ag Engineering department at the University of Kentucky, focusing on livestock facilities. And in my personal life, I farm about 500 acres in Boyle County with my husband. We have a commercial cattle and hay operation there.
And I'm Josh Jackson. I'm an assistant professor in Biosystems and Agriculture Engineering, focusing on precision livestock farming. I farm in Mercer County with my family, and we focus on hay production, raising registered Angus cattle.
Okay, Josh, we're going to start with what's been happening on the farm this week. It's been a somewhat wet and somewhat cold week. Yep. I will say we're recording this on Tuesday. Typically, we record Wednesday or Thursday. A little early this week because we are on spring break this week, and we both have farm visits later in the week.
So, what we had was mainly conducting repairs. So, still doing a lot of repairs, trying to get equipment ready to go for this summer, and just going through and making sure we just started calving. So, we got our first calf on the ground. So, that's been a thing. So, we had the calf on the ground, and the weather, temperature dropped, and a lot of effort had to be put in just making sure he was okay. We're going to be okay. And
right.
So, we got a lot more to come, but we're just about to get that first calf on the ground, make sure he's staying alive. Then just, like I said, just general repairs and trying to keep everything going. Took the engine out of my brother's car, so just a lot of different repairs.
Yeah, we're sort of in a similar situation. We have a cattle trailer. Last week I picked up wheel studs and bolts to put that wheel back together, and then we managed to crack the rim anyway when trying to get the old ones out. So now we're on wait again for another rim. Fortunately, we were able to borrow a trailer to get our calves weaned as well. So we're going to focus on that, but you weaned your fall group. We are just in the process of getting weights and working on weaning our fall group right now. They're separated currently, or they were this morning. I cannot guarantee that they are still separated here this afternoon, but we put up some more panels to try and contain them after the rodeo we had to deal with this morning. So I'm hopeful that we actually have successfully weaned.
Keep them separate groups. Yeah.
Hopefully they're separated. They're in the process of weaning regardless of their will to do so.
Yeah, we've done fenceline weaning for a number of years now. So traditionally we had put the calves behind our barn, and then we took all the cows at the back 40. And so then you'd have them yelling and screaming, breaking through fence lines, just general destruction, kind of like what you're talking about here. So we went to fenceline weaning where they're there, they can nuzzle. We put a hay bale out for the cows. They can be up close for a couple of days. Then once that hay bale's gone, they have to go further away from the calves to actually get their hay.
Okay.
And so it's kind of this gradual process of they're right there, they can move, they can nuzzle for the first couple of days, but then we're really trying to get them separated. And somewhat limit the stress we put on the animals.
Yeah, it is really tricky. There's a lot of stress involved in weaning, and for us, the trick is that we have a leased piece of land. And weaning on that piece of land, the fences are just not reliable enough, so fence line isn't really an option for that group. And so for that reason, and also to make sure that all of our calves get weaned at one time, even if they're on multiple farms, our strategy is to do a little bit different style of weaning, and we'll talk about it. It's probably a little bit higher stress. On the other hand, they get a lot of feed, and if they have seen feed before, that's usually a pretty successful for the calves. The cows are a little bit more feisty about it. The calves actually handle it extremely.
That's surprising. Yeah, for our system, we actually have an electric fence around our calf lot. So around the calf lot, around the bottom actually is an electric fence, a hot wire along the bottom. We have our woven wire fence and electric fence along the bottom just to make sure that the calves don't push too much.
Yeah, we did have one calf walk out through a feed panel and then walk out through another set of fencing, and it went to visit cows, not its own mother, but it did visit cows this morning. So unfortunately we got him captured and back in the group, and nothing else made it out. So
okay, yeah, push through some panels though? I guess we'll see.
It was just single wires. He went under wires.
Okay.
Still actually a little surprising how he went through. It was not a particularly great spot to
Hmm.
exit, but he could hear other animals and he knew that there were cows somewhere else and he went to go see them.
Okay.
He got to Fenceline Wean with cows that were not his mother. So we'll see.
We just have to manage and do. Yeah, for ours, we like prior to weaning, we actually do a couple of our vaccinations prior to weaning, prior to the stress.
Yeah.
We usually give our second round of blackleg, so we'll give our first round prior to weaning, then we'll give our second round about 2 weeks after weaning.
Yeah.
And so on some of them, we've actually done both rounds already. So on some of them where they were born early September, we've already done both rounds. We were able to do both rounds.
Right.
But we try to get the blackleg in and make sure that's
done as quickly as you can.
Quickly as we can, yeah.
Yeah, and for anyone who doesn't know, blackleg is a disease in cattle. It doesn't usually show up until they're about 6 to 8 months of age. They have to be about 600-ish pounds before it shows up. And they essentially keel over and die very quickly. There's not a lot of indicators that they're going to be sick. They're literally just going to die. And it is something that is endemic in this area. So it is in the ground, it's in the soil. Farms that have had blackleg issues in the past will probably continue to have them, and it's really important we vaccinate for it around here. We vaccinate for it also because we've seen it on our farms. And so one of the things that we do is we also, similar to you, we vaccinate before weaning. Most of our calves have had 2 rounds already, and they will get a 3rd round here just in 2 weeks once we get through the stress of weaning. And we know that their bodies are more receptive to some vaccines. So sort of similar to you, we sort of are on the same page that we get blackleg in early because we've had it on the farm before.
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge. We'll actually also do on some of our heifers, we'll actually go ahead and this upcoming week, we're going to do a pink eye vaccination. So pink eye, it's a big challenge for us during the summer. And so we'll do that as well, in addition to our other vaccinations that they get, typical calf foot vaccination.
So are you doing a specialized pink eye, or are you just doing something with some mycoplasma in a more general vaccine that you would already pick up?
So it was traditionally been a vaccine that we picked up, and we still had some issues with it. So now it's more a specialized vaccine we have prepared, but our local veterinarian prepares it for us. So trying to get something that's been local and regional that they think may be a problem for this area this upcoming year. So we had traditionally, our pink eye, it's just been a challenge these past couple of years. And so just try to get ahead of that with some vaccination, make it a little less severe.
I think that's a good plan. And it seems like we had some pretty good cold snaps this winter, which in theory should help with some of our populations of bugs, I guess, in theory. That's what people tell me anyway. I'm not an expert on that, but I already see flies in my yard, and we have a pond that the neighbors own. I don't have to maintain it, but it is close by a water source, and so sometimes we can see some bugs pretty early in the spring, and I still see a lot of them, so I'm not optimistic that the flies aren't going to be heavy this summer. And if the flies are heavy, the spread of pink eye can be pretty quick.
So yeah, I mean, we've seen it because usually it's 1, 2, 10. It seems like just exponential on issue, and so once you get it on the farm, you're just knocked back on your heels, pretty much just trying to recover. So we really try to be as preventative as possible, as much as we can with that. But we did go ahead and take the weights of our calves and our cows, and it was kind of interesting to look at. We analyzed for some of them. I was able to look at that and just looking at their weights. Our average weight for ours was about 424 pounds, and this is with they have access to creep feed. They do have access to creep feed. And for our heifers, the average was about 440, and our steers, the average was about the calves that were heifers, the average was 440, and our calves that were steers, they were 414.
Interesting. And do you have any bull calves in this group?
We have any bull calves? I didn't actually get to run those numbers yet.
Yeah, that's a whole different group for you, I'm sure, and
yep,
a whole different location probably as they get weaned. Management style.
Yep, they'll move into a bull lot and they'll get managed separately.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, I think that concept of cow weight to calf weight, or at least frame size to frame size is probably going to be very interesting and probably maybe a better decision making matrix than just straight up weaning weights.
Yeah, we've looked at it for a couple years now. So I've done it 205-day weight adjusted and looked at it just as the raw data. And so I'm actually concerned about the raw data just because when we go to sell a calf, they're not when I sell a calf at the stocker, they're not worried about the adjusted weight.
Right.
So it is what it is. And so with that performance in mind, it'll bias towards ones that are born earlier, but that's an advantage to me. And so there are heifers. If I have calves, the heifers that have calves, we'll allow them a year or two to have calves, and then we'll give them a couple buy years
Essentially allow them to develop milk production.
Yes.
In case they aren't really very efficient at this point, or they're still working on putting on body weight instead of putting weight on calves.
Yeah, so that'd be corrected for in the 205-day weight. But
Right.
we could look at it. I allow them just say, okay, they're heifers, they're still developing. Like you said, that's milk production. All of those factors still play into it. So with some of those, we have, we look at our crosshatch. My heifer is going to be in my lower left quadrant of my relationship map, just because they're going to be lighter calves from a lighter cow.
Right. Makes sense.
And so as we, some of my heavier cows, I didn't have many underperformers this year. I think we were able to cut out some of those who were low performers in the past year. And so if I had, a heavy cow, small calf, that bottom right-hand quadrant, those are ones I was really looking at to see, if they're a big cow with a very small calf, that puts them in the crosshairs, for me to really closely evaluate them. Say, do I need this cow? Is she a productive, efficient cow?
So when you were bringing animals up, and we talk about weights, you and I are both really big on getting weights and making decisions based upon performance of those calves as well as the cows. Is there anything else that you were looking at? Like, the one thing we haven't probably talked about very much is just generally body conformation, things like that.
So that does play into it. So, usually the larger animals are going to be a little more meaty looking. They're going to be a stouter boned, heavier made animal. And so when we have our bulls, we have our heifers, we want them to be high performance animals. So we're looking for those ones that have that stocky build, that brood cow prospect. And so I'm looking at these and trying to see which ones are going to be have the most potential as well. So I'm looking at how they walk. Are they sickle hocked? Are they straight, posty legged? The conformation is very important to me as well. So that's something we do simplistically. So that we sell on weight, but it's also how they look and how they walk and the feet and legs. Can they get out there and move? And do they have that? For the heifers, do they have that heifer or cow look? Or for steers and bulls, do they have that look as well?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, but I look at an animal and I always look at their head shape and I'm just like, I like that one. It has a nice head on it. And it's a little bit, I think, for calving ease, you don't want really very square heads on an animal. You want sort of a narrower head, and it's a more effeminate look. So sometimes people will prefer a more square head on a bull, but I'm always very hesitant if something has a really large head on a bull. I'm like, I don't really want that coming out of my cow. So I always tend towards more effeminate looking animals, and I know that that's probably just an inherent bias that I have. Like when I look at them, I will always lean that direction.
Yeah, I do want my females to have a feminine look. I want them to have a feminine, smooth shoulder, but I want my bulls to be the muscular, heavy bone, stout made animals. So it's kind of that. It's paradox for me. I haven't been really, I've always heard the swirl and different aspects of the head shape for the bulls, but for the most part, I was like, well, we'll look at the EPDs, look at performance, and see where they lie.
And if you get them up and work them, and there's a problem,
and if there's
that whirl might reinforce what they already see. If there's a problem,
if there's a whirl, if there's distribution, we'll figure it out, and then they'll either sort themselves out, or they'll be calm and they'll get to remain a bull.
There you go. Yeah, so I think that makes sense. I think weaning in general is sort of an interesting process for you when you fence line wean. Can you maybe describe, for anyone who's listening, how long it takes to wean an animal, how much falling you have from the cows as well as from the calves?
So, for us, we actually wean them right next to my brother's house. So it's kind of funny. He gets to listen to all that. They get to serenade him to sleep, But, they do make some noise when they're going to bawl. And those first 2 days is pretty much the cows and the calves. By day 3, the cows have generally subsided. and it's largely still the calves that are balling. And day 4 and 5, it's still the calves are balling. Sometimes the cow, but for the most part, the cows have moved on. At least for our herd, because we focus on they had that hay bale right there close to the calves, in that same lot where they are adjacent to the calves. They have a hay bale close by, but then by day 2 or 3, it's gone. There's something to clean up, so they're slowly being moved away from the calves, and have to. The cows just have to get used to the fact that they are where they are, and so it seems by day 3 or 4 they've gotten acclimated to it. And we have pretty much the only access they have is kind of this 16-foot gate is kind of where they have to nuzzle.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's another lot that they don't have access to. It's another lot. Majority of the fence line where the cows would be on the side with the cows is they're separated by another fence line. Another lot is there.
Okay.
So they have that 16-foot to nuzzle and talk to the calves and do whatever. But then otherwise, we put extra panels there. We have 2 or 3 panels there. We'll put in front of that gate. It's a 14 gauge gate, but we'll put additional panels in front of it just because we don't want anybody really pushing it and trying to get out.
Go under or over it.
Under, over, whatever it may be. And so the rest of it, like I said, was electrified. And so they do ball for 2 days. It's throughout the night, that first night, and even throughout the night, the second night. But by day 3, generally speaking, cows have kind of moved on, and the calves are still going to occasionally ball, or they're still balling throughout the day.
They're still looking for milk, especially first thing in the morning, probably, and then sort of settling down into accepting it over time.
And when we feed them, everybody quiets down. All the calves quiet down when we feed them. So we also try to give them additional grain and hay just to make sure they acclimate fairly quickly. And most of them are actually used to the ball waterers too, so they come in there ready to go in that aspect. So,
do you ever, for this group, because it's still in the cold season, if you wean on a ball water, but do you ever wean in your fall and leave the balls off and leave it more as an open water?
We occasionally, so there's been some years where we've had some calves that may look like they're having trouble with it. We'll go ahead and
or knock it down, and
we'll knock it down. We'll put a tobacco stick in there, break a tobacco stick, and put it in there to just force it open. There's ways to put it in there and pry it in there. And so we'll just leave it open. So we had that really cold snap this weekend. We had to make sure that it was still
broken.
Functional. And then once we got past that, we can go ahead and leave it open. Fix it so that it stays open.
Makes sense. That's probably a good option, especially if you've got smaller calves or ones that look like they aren't really drinking very well out of the balls. Balls have a good amount of pressure depending on how they're set.
Yep.
Which is good for cows, because otherwise cows play in the water and make a mess. But for the younger calves, it can be challenging for them to get into the ball waterers if there's not a reduced water level. So a lot of times they get to water when they're in with their mothers. The mothers drink down the water, and there's a little bit of a gap, so there's not really pressure on that ball, so then the calves can easily drink. So sometimes you have to do something to either break that open or
set. So we typically would put a tobacco stick and just modify it enough to make it so that it would stay open.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So it's a low-cost solution.
That is a low cost. Ours actually has an adjustment, so we can actually drop the level of the balls a little bit, which we sometimes do. Sometimes we just pop off the side if it's warm enough, and we'll leave it open.
Okay.
That's one of the reasons I like that style of water. Maybe we'll do a whole talk about waterers and our preferences about waterers. That's a whole
talk, because then you get into tire versus tank, and
there's lots of things we could talk about with water tanks. So I don't want to go on that road today, but I think that's really interesting, because I think feed, water, and hay, and making sure that the calves take all 3. The cows are going to figure out how to get all 3. I mean, they're a little upset, but they're going to. Now, on the cows, are you really? I know you traditionally do feed slightly through the winter time. Are you now cutting all of those cows off of feed completely?
All of them are off feed. So the heifers were getting food. So our heifers and younger females. The younger females were getting feed, and now they're cut off feed, just strictly getting hay.
And you want to describe for the audience why that is? Because I think that's kind of an interesting thing that maybe not everyone knows.
So, nutritionally speaking, so they have a much higher demand as far as lactation. Lactation is going to take a lot of demand as far as energy and protein is concerned. So when we reduce that demand, then they're just at net energy metabolism. They're just trying to maintain balance and make sure they stay bred. And so that's primarily why we try to reduce that nutritional or supplementation. It's because there's less demand, because they don't have to support that calf as well. It's not being diverted. That energy is not being diverted to lactation.
That makes complete sense. Yeah, we also will cut off any feed for our cows when we didn't talk about it, but our concern is also that we want to make sure when they come off of milk that they really come off of milk as quickly and safely as they can. They should be already reducing that milk production anyway, but the last thing we want to do is feed them and have them turn up milk again without a calf on them, because that could create some mastitis. So we just cold turkey no feed when the calves come off. And then possibly if there's something that needs a little bit of nutrient, we can wait a month or 6 weeks out, and then we can give a little bit to bump.
Make sure they stay pregnant.
Make sure they're pregnant, yeah.
We'll do preg testing hopefully here soon.
Yeah, that's our goal as well. We have about 2 weeks before pregnant testing happens. Then we'll have to talk about our results. I'm kind of embarrassed some years, but some years are great. So it could be a good or a terrible year.
We've had some challenging years in the past. So
we're going to find out.
Yeah.
And you'll find out with us, because I'll find out what Josh tells me, and he'll find out when I tell him. So that'll be exciting. We'll do that in a few weeks here. I think with that, that's probably a good sort of summary of fence line feeding. I think 2 days is probably pretty good for most people that have weaned animals before. They should feel happy with that number if that's what they're getting. What are you going to be doing now in the next week?
They got the horse puck auction this weekend, so I might go out there and just socialize and try not to buy anything because everything's expensive. And then work on just keeping repairing equipment. We got to keep moving forward. So it's coming. We're in March, so we got to it's make or break within a month or so.
Yeah, we sort of have some similar goals. We have some work we have to do, repairs that we need to do. We have a starter on one of the tractors. The actual, not the starter itself.
Switch.
It's not really the switch. It's actually more of an electronic relay for the starter. I think is bad. But that's a part that has to come in, and that'll take us a little bit of time. So it's ordered, but not in yet, but that needs to be replaced. And then, of course, we're still working on a hub on a trailer. I told you that was a fiasco this week. There's always a fiasco every week. It's not unusual.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always something, yeah, because we actually did all the hubs and greased all the bearings for our hay trailers.
Oh, that's such an important thing to do. We really actually need to repack a couple bearings. We repacked most of our hay wagons last year, but we have 1 or 2 that still have some and then, of course, the tongue really needs greased as well.
And we did, one last year. We pulled it apart. It's like, oh, we're probably good this year. And we pulled it apart, and it just all the bearings just fell out, and we're just, holy cow, we were probably one more bale away from it just obliterating on us.
Yeah.
So it's really important to check those.
Yeah, there's a lot of weight on hay wagons. I don't know if people appreciate that. And people drive slowly when they drive a hay wagon down the road because they are designed to not really go over 30 most of the time. And so don't feel like you can push them to go 50 because they're not supposed to.
Nope.
And you don't want to be behind one that's going 50 most of the time.
Plus they have to stop.
And there's no brake on a hay wagon, so do not expect it to stop quickly. That is not a good expectation to have. So be respectful of the hay moving equipment, the wagons, the bale wagons. All of those things are the tobacco wagons live around here.
Yep, it's that's what you have. So
absolutely, and we use them heavily. So, and we will continue to use them heavily and hope that people don't pass us on small roads because it's scary when they.
But with that, I think we're done for today. And
yeah, I think we're done for the day. We'll come back next week and we'll talk a little bit about how weaning works for me with the barn, which is probably not that different, but sort of an interesting juxtaposition. So we'll see you guys next time.
All right.
Cultural engineering. Discover what's wildly possible at ca.uky.edu.